What's happening, everyone? Steve here, Cars with Steve, and today we're doing another head-to-head comparison. This time we're going to take a look at the 2021 Ford Explorer and we're going to compare that to the 2021 Ford Edge. Now the reason why you want to watch this video is because we're going to compare the size dimensions and the features looking at the Edge versus the Explorer. It's going to be a fun time. Before we get started, if you enjoy the content, give it a thumbs up. Think about sharing it with your social networks, but let's dive into it, have a little bit of fun, and see what the differences are between these two vehicles. Taking a peek underneath the hood of the Edge, we do have two available engine choices, either a 2-liter or a 2.7-liter turbo. Now the 2.7-liter is only available in the Edge ST. Now this one is the Edge ST line, so it's got the look of the Edge ST, but it's only got the regular 2-liter turbo engine. From a power perspective, the 2-liter is going to be able to push out 250 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, while the 2.7-liter engine is going to push out 335 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque. When it comes down to some things that we can do underneath the hood, as you can see there, we can easily top up some fluids if we need to. We can check or change our oil, and we've got easy access to the battery if we ever need to give anybody a boost. Next up, taking a peek underneath the hood of the Explorer. So depending on the trim level of the vehicle that you're in, there actually are 4 different configuration choices that are available inside of the Explorer. We've got the 2.3-liter EcoBoost that we're looking at here. We've got a 3-liter twin turbo, so twin turbo EcoBoost, and we also do have a 3.3-liter hybrid. Now, that's 3. The 4th is actually the difference between the Platinum versus the ST because they're tuned differently. We'll get to the power in a second. Looking at the 2.3-liter EcoBoost, it's going to be able to push out 300 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, while the 3.3-liter hybrid is going to be able to push out 318 horsepower and 322 pound-feet of torque. Now, when it comes down to the 3-liter twin turbo, in the Platinum version of the vehicle, it's going to be 365 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque, while the 3-liter in the ST version of the Explorer is going to push out 400 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque. So that 3-liter twin turbo inside of the Platinum and the ST technically is the same engine, but it's tuned very, very differently from one to the other. We do have some easy access to a few things, so as you can see, we can easily top up our windshield wiper fluid if we need to. Checking and changing our oil, it's honestly a little bit more challenging there because of how far underneath it is, but we've got the ability to do that if we're handy. And we also do have easy access to our battery, which is going to be just under the cover along the top there. Now looking at some standard technology inside of the vehicle, as you can see there, we do have our backup camera, and very similar across the Ford lineup, we're going to at least have our blind spot system as well as our lane keeping system, so lane keeping and lane centering. Now one thing to note, the reverse sensing system here is not going to be standard across the entire Edge lineup. We do have to be in specific trims in order to get that standard, but it is available optional along the entire lineup. When it comes down to filling up fuel inside of the vehicle, so as you can see there, we do have a little gas cover there, and it's a capless system, so just insert your fuel hose, fill up, and when you're good to go, you're just going to close the door, click it to lock it back into place. When it comes down to fuel quality, minimum manufacturer's recommendation is just regular 87 octane, so your regular 87 gas. Now when it comes to the horsepower and the torque specs that we were talking about earlier, that's achieved using a premium fuel. Do you need to use a premium fuel? Absolutely not, but you're going to notice about a 10% difference in the performance by using either an 89 or ideally a 91 octane. When it comes down to towing inside of the Edge, whether you look at the 2-liter turbo or the 2.7-liter turbo, they're both rated for the same towing capacity. Both vehicles are going to be able to pull up to 3,500 pounds if you get the tow package directly from the factory. So definitely recommend, if you're ever considering towing, could you do an aftermarket hitch? Absolutely. If you're really only using it for a bike rack carrier, etc., you could absolutely do that. But getting it from the factory, 3,500 pound towing capacity, doing an aftermarket, you're going to be closer to about 1,500 pounds. So definitely something to take into account. Now looking at some standard technology inside of the Explorer, so this is going to be the same regardless of the trim level that you're on. We've got our backup camera, we're going to have the reverse sensing system, that'll be standard. We've also got our blind spot system, lets us know if anybody's under the blind spot on either side of the vehicle, and we also do have our lane keeping system, so lane keeping and lane centering. On top of that, on the outside there, you can just kind of make it out, but we do have the ability to use a 5-digit factory number in order to get inside of the vehicle, so we do have keyless entry there, which is great. When it comes down to filling up fuel inside of the Explorer, it's a very straightforward process. So along our driver's side, we've got a little cutout there, insert our fuel hose, fill up, and then you're set to go. Now, when it comes down to fuel quality, the 2.3-liter engines inside of the XLT and the Limited, you could realistically get away with that minimum manufacturer's recommendation of just your 87 octane. When it comes down to the Platinum and the ST, so those 3-liter twin turbo engines, I definitely recommend using at least an 89, ideally a 91 octane, because those horsepower and torque specs that we're looking at across the entire lineup are achieved using a quality fuel, a high quality fuel, 91 or 94 typically. But having said that, you don't need to use those higher quality fuels inside of this. Minimum manufacturer's recommendation across the entire lineup is just your regular 87 octane. When it comes down to towing inside of the Explorer, so a few things to take into account. I do recommend getting the tow package from the factory. Just visually, it just cut out nicely inside of the bumper area there. You get the receiver, you also get the wiring harnesses. Now on top of that, inside of the tow package from the factory, you also get an upgraded oil engine cooler. So definitely useful, because if you do factory towing, you're gonna max out at 5,600 pounds, 5,300 or 5,600, depending on if you're looking at the 2.3 versus a 3-liter engine. Now if you do something aftermarket, you're gonna pretty much cut your towing capacity in half by doing an aftermarket bolt-on instead, which is good if you're carrying a light trailer or if you're going to be carrying like a bike rack. But if you're going to be carrying more weight, definitely recommend tow package from the factory. When it comes down to the liftgate inside of the Edge, so in the SE version of the vehicle, it's going to be a manual liftgate. When you get into the SEL, it's going to be power. In the Titanium and the ST, you're going to have a foot-activated liftgate instead. So we're actually in the ST line, which essentially is a prettied-up SEL. It's got all the functionality in the form of the SEL, but it's got the look of the ST. So looking at the liftgate, very similar to the Escape, there's a button right underneath. All we would do is push that button, and if you've got power, it's automatically going to lift up from there. If you're in one of the other trim levels, so the foot activated, all you do is just swipe your foot underneath, or if you're manual, you're just going to unlock using that same button, and then you just manually lift up instead. Let's have a peek inside. Right. So as you can see there, we do have quite a little bit of depth inside of the vehicle. So this is going to be a little bit different than the Escape because it's going to be pushed back a little bit more, which means that we've got a little bit more storage space. So it is a little bit of a wider vehicle at the end of the day. You're going to get more space in between both sides as well. But as you can see, plenty of cargo space inside of this vehicle. You know, let's compare that when that second row is folded down. So similar to on the Escape side of things, so we've got a 60-40 split, so 60% driver side, 40% passenger. So if we need to fold one seat down over the other, we've got the capabilities to easily do that. Taking a look along the backhand side here, so a few things to point out. If we're in the SE version of the vehicle, it's going to be a manual up and down. Looking at the SEL and above, as you can see there, we do have power down, so it's going to be power down and manual up. So all we would have to do is either press or hold the left or the right side, and it's going to drop those seats down for us. We will have this 12-volt adapter there regardless, and along the right-hand side, so not too much along that side, as you can see there, we've got a little bit of storage space along the top and the bottom. Now we do also have the ability to add in a cargo shade, so a privacy shade if we want to. And then this is going to be just our regular carpet liner along the back. We do have the option for a thermoplastic rubber tray in the back there instead. Lifting this up, as you can see, we do have our mini spare tire. We've got our spigot. The jack is actually just underneath the tire there. We've got a lot of storage along both sides there as well. So nice to know that we can store a few extra things if we need to. Now, one of the nice things about the Explorer lineup is that regardless of the trim level you're on, you will have a powered liftgate. Now, when you're in the higher trim levels, you will have a foot-activated liftgate instead. But in order to open this thing up, very straightforward on the outside, just underneath the R in the Explorer, there's a little button there. So if you've just got power inside of your Explorer, you're just going to lift that up. You can also use your key fob in order to lift that up and down as well. Let's have a little bit of a peek inside. Now, taking a peek at the back, one thing that sets the Explorer apart from the Edge and the Escape is what's going on with the actual seating configuration. Because inside of the Explorer, we've got the ability to have up to 7 seats inside of this thing. It's all going to depend on what you do with that middle row, because we can either have a dual captain chair setup or a bench setup instead. But looking at the cargo dimensions, as you can see there, we do have quite a little bit of space. Now, when it comes down to the seats themselves, in the XLT trim level of the vehicle, so the base trim level, you are going to be manual up and manual down. When you're in the Limited, we're actually going to have power for that third row, and it's going to be manual fold for the second row regardless of the trim level that you're on. Now, looking at the cargo dimensions there, so as you can see, when we fold that second row down, we've got even more space than we had inside of the Edge, and as you can see there, lots of width to the vehicle as well. So big difference. If you need a little bit more space, you may need to look at the Explorer as an option. All right, now look how much space we have inside of the Explorer when we fold down that second row as well. So definitely the vehicle to go for if you're going to be transporting larger cargo, because you've got the ability to fold those seats down individually. Now, that's one of the beautiful things about this. If you go for the middle row configuration where you've got the bench seat instead, you can actually fold each of the 3 seats down individually. And then that back row, you've got the ability to fold them down separately as well. So if you need to kind of get some things inside of that, you've got the capability to do that very, very simply. Now, looking along the back, so this is going to be standard across the Explorer lineup. So we've got a little bit of storage space along both sides. Underneath, we've got another little storage tray. So we've got a little bit of storage space underneath this as well. And then on top of that, when we crank this and we lift this out, as you can see there, we also do have our mini spare tire. And our jack and everything is just underneath that. Now looking along the right-hand side, as you can see there, we do have a cigarette lighter adapter, so we can adjust that as necessary. Now when we're in the limited version of the vehicle, the ST as well as the Platinum, we will have power for that third row. So the buttons are going to be just along the side there, and you've got the ability to fold them down individually or one at a time. Now when it comes down to second row spacing inside of the Edge, so I've got the driver's seat set up for somebody who's 6 feet tall. I'm 6 feet tall. I've got a boatload of knee room. I've got a bunch of foot room as well, which is great. Now when it comes down to head space, I've got about 1.5 inches maybe of headroom up ahead. So this one does have the twin panel sunroof on there, so definitely something to consider. If you need something with a little bit more head space, you might have to look at one that doesn't have the sunroof, or just get the taller people to sit in the front seat instead. Now taking a peek at some few standard things, we've got some pockets along both sides. And moving down here, so let's take a peek, and as you can see there, we've got a little storage area. We've got a few USB ports, so our USB and our USB-C, as well as a built-in inverter. So if you need to plug in a traditional wall outlet, we've got the ability to easily do that. Now one thing to note, depending on the trim level of the vehicle that you're in, you may or you may not have heated seats. Those buttons would just be along the side there. So we're in the ST line, which is essentially just an SEL. When we look at the Titanium or the ST, we would have the ability to have heated seats instead. Next up, taking a peek at the actual seat itself. So this is the way that the seat's going to look when we get into the ST line of the vehicle. So we've got a little bit of a split between that cloth versus the leather. Now one thing to note, when we're in the SEL version, we're going to have ActiveX seating material, which is essentially a pleather seat. When we get into the SE, it's going to strictly be cloth. When it comes down to the Titanium, it's going to be a true leather, and then in the ST version, the true ST version, we're going to have a similar style seat to that vehicle as well. Now one thing to note, we do have cup holders that are available there, so we can just pop those down and we can just lift it up in order to lock it back into place. Now when it comes down to spacing inside of the Explorer, I've got the driver's seat set up for somebody who's 6 feet tall. I'm 6 feet tall. I've got about 2.5 inches of headspace up overhead with the twin panel sunroof. So if we get rid of that roof, if you don't need it as an option, you're gonna have an extra inch and change of headspace. So definitely something to take into account there. But I do have a ton of space there for my knees and for my feet. And we do have the ability to actually slide these seats forwards and backwards individually. So this middle row, if you go for the seat configuration with the bench seat, this middle row is gonna be locked in place no matter what, but you have the ability to slide these other seats forwards and backwards a little bit more if you needed to create a little bit more room for the folks in the back. Now looking at some things that are going to be standards, as you can see there, we've got a pocket for both sides, so for the driver passenger side, as we start to look at the seats themselves. So the XLT will not have heated second row seats whatsoever. When we get into the limited and above, we will have heated second row seats, but it's only going to be for the outboard seats. So the driver passenger side, this middle seat is never going to be heated. So definitely something to consider there. Looking at our basic controls along the back, as you can see, we've got our fan control. We can adjust what's going on with the temperature. We can figure out if it's going to our face or our feet. We've got a few USB ports, so our USB and our USB-C, as well as a traditional 12-volt adapter. Now, if we were in the limited and above, we would have a few extra buttons there, and that would be for our heated second row seats. Moving down a tiny little bit more, as you can see there, we also do have a little bit of storage space. And then one thing to point out is that in the XLT version of the vehicle, we do not have a sunshade, but when we get into the limited and above, we would have a sunshade for those second row seats as well. Cup holders along the back when it comes down to it. So on all of the trim levels of the vehicle, we will have added cup holders that are available there. If we get the bench seat, that's the setup, the way it'll look. If we go for the option that's not the bench seat, so if we go for the dual captain's chairs instead, little console along the bottom there with a few cup holders as well. Okay, taking a peek at the third row, so we can easily get into the back there, and this is going to be the same regardless of the trim level that you're looking at. Now, one thing to note is what's going on with this middle row. So as I mentioned, you've got the ability to have either dual captain's chairs, or we can do that bench seat instead, but it's ultimately going to depend on how many seats you need inside of the vehicle. Because something to consider here is that if you need 7-seat configuration, you're going to have to go with this option. But one of the nice things is that if we don't get this bench seat in the middle, we're going to have a tiny little console down there where we can easily pass through to the back instead. But realistically, at the end of the day, like, we've got quite a little bit of space there. I'm 6 feet tall, and I've got the ability to easily get in the back of this thing if I need to. Now moving that seat backwards, as you can see there. Now as a default, it's going to pretty much be pushed forward there. So if we take a look at the difference. So having said that, I've got a tiny little bit of knee room, so not a ton, tiny little bit of foot space as well. So it is a little bit cramped back here. But having said that, I'm 6 feet tall. So realistically, am I going to get into the back of the Explorer? Typically not, but at the end of the day, knowing that if you've got people that are a little bit taller, they technically can fit back here okay, because I've got about 3 inches of headspace up overhead, and we do have the ability to push these seats, so the captain's chairs along the outside, we can actually push these seats forward if we need to. Now, one thing to note, this one is locked into place, so if you're going to have some taller people, you may have to look at the option with, instead of the bench seat, with the console instead, in order to get rid of this middle seat to open up that knee room. Looking along the back both sides, we do have some cup holders and a tiny little bit of storage space, and that's really it. Now, taking a peek at the driver's side door, so as you can see there, we do have the ability to get inside of it just using a 5-digit factory number, very similar to what we saw in the Escape, available on certain trim levels. Now, as we hop inside, so a few things to note along the driver's door. So as you can see there, we've got our unlock and our lock buttons. We've got the ability to kill off power to those rear windows. We've got the ability to adjust our side view mirrors, roll our windows up and down. Now, as I mentioned, this is the ST line of the vehicle. So as you can see there, we do have that ST line badging along the side. So very, very nice look. Just to the left-hand side there, so we've got the ability to turn our fog lamps on or off, and we've got the ability to figure out what's going on with our running lamps. Honestly, the only 2 settings that I really recommend you worry about are all the way to the left, which is going to be off, or all the way to the right, which is our auto setting. So that's going to automatically flip us between the daytime or the nighttime running lamps. We can adjust the screen brightness there, so that's going to be the screen brightness for the instrument cluster. We've got the ability to turn our traction control system on or off, and this one is going to show up depending on what trim level of the vehicle you've got, because that's going to be a button in order to open up our power liftgate. Moving down, we've got easy access to our fuse panel, and we've also got the ability to open up our hood if we need to. Now, when it comes down to the SEL, the ST line, the ST, and the Titanium, they're all going to have a power adjustable driver's seat and a power adjustable passenger seat. The SE is going to be a different story, so we're going to have a manual passenger seat instead. So we've got the ability to move the seat forwards, backwards, up and down. We can move our backrest as well. When it comes down to the actual steering wheel itself, so the steering wheel, we've got the ability to manually adjust. It will come power adjustable if you're in some of those higher trim levels, but if you're not power, just in between our legs, and it's telescopic across the entire lineup, so we can go in and out, we can go up and down, and then we can easily just lock it back into place again. Next up, taking a peek at the steering wheel. So this is the ST line of the vehicle, so we've got some nice unique red stitching along the side. That's going to be the same in the ST version of the vehicle. In the SEL and the Titanium, it's going to look slightly different, but you're going to have a lot of the same features and functionalities. So when we do get the Copilot 360 Plus package, or if you're in the higher trim levels, you will have the adaptive cruise control system. So we've got the ability to essentially just set it and forget it for a cruise. We've got the ability to adjust what's going on that left screen. This is going to give us the ability to adjust what's going on that right screen. Moving down, we've got the ability to change between songs and radio stations. We can either answer or hang up on a phone call. We can adjust our volume, we can mute, or we've got the ability to use our voice for a few different things. So we've got the ability to navigate, we can change radio stations, or we can make a phone call by using our voice just by pressing that button along the steering wheel. Now, one thing to note, as we can look along the top there, we've got the ability to toggle our lane keeping system on or off. Lane keeping system works 3 different ways, so it's either going to give us a steering wheel shake if we start to veer over to a lane without signaling, or it's actually going to take over the steering wheel, recenter us, and pull us back into our lane. Now, this is actually new for the 2021 model year, so we are now on Sync 4 inside of the Edge. So this is just going to be a basic look at the screen. If you're looking for that more full walk around, check down in the description below because I've put together a comprehensive video about how this works. Now, one thing to note is that if your vehicle does not have factory navigation, don't worry about it because you do have the ability to use Android Auto and Apple CarPlay directly through this middle screen. So you'll be able to use Waze, Google Maps, or Apple Maps, and one of the nice things is that we can connect to Android Auto and Apple CarPlay wirelessly now inside of the Edge. So that's a really cool benefit. Up along the top there, we've got some basic settings, so sound, radio, phone list, general settings, view, and a number of other things. Voice control is great because it does give us the ability to make phone calls. We can change the radio station. We can navigate directly using our voice. We can get rid of that. We've got a hot button to pull up a few other things, so we've got some navigation there. So this specific one does have factory navigation. Now, one thing to note about the factory navigation inside of the Edge for the 2021 model year is that you do have 3 years of connected service. So that's going to be your traffic, your live traffic alerts, weather, things like that. After the 3 years, it does require a subscription. But as I mentioned, you do have the ability to use Google Maps, Apple Maps, or Waze directly through this middle screen instead. As we start to move down a little bit, so we do have our climate control settings, which are now on this digital screen instead. So we've got dual zone climate control. We can figure out what's happening with our cabin temperature, which is great. We can drop that back down. And we've also got the ability to turn on our heated seats for the driver's side, heated seat for the passenger, and our heated steering wheel. Now, one thing to note, if you're in the higher trim levels of the vehicle, you're gonna have heated and cooled front seats. So it's really nice to know that we've got the ability to add that on if we'd like to. As we start to move down the center stack, we've got the ability to adjust our volume. We can tune. Honestly, this is probably going to be the least effective method of tuning. Your best bet is just to change the station using your voice instead. We've got the ability to adjust some basic settings. We've got the ability to look at our reverse camera. And we've got the ability to change between stations. We can play or pause from there. As we start to move down, so the wireless charging pad there is available as an option on some of the trim levels. We've got the ability to plug in a few things. We've got our USB and our USB-C. Moving down a tiny little bit more, so as you can see there's a really nice look, so you can just kind of make it, but it's like a faux carbon fiber look inside of this. So this is the ST line of the vehicle. It would be an aluminum, so a different style look if you were to look at other trim levels instead. But as you can see there, we do have our park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then our sport mode. Moving down a little bit more, we've got our parking brake, and we've got our auto start stop. So we've got the ability to turn that system off if we really, really don't like it. Now, one thing to note is that it's not going to be permanently off. We do have to turn that on and off every single time we get inside of the vehicle and turn the engine off. As we start to move down, so as you can see there, we've got a little storage tray that we can easily pop out. And looking down, we've got a 12-volt adapter, so we can plug in a traditional cigarette lighter adapter there if we need to, and back down in order to lock it into place. As we start to move up overhead, so we do have optional home link there. Again, depending on the trim level that you're on, we can move this out and swing it out to the side there. And the vanity mirror itself actually does have those lights. Up overhead there, so we do have an auto dimming mirror that is available on some of the trim levels. Up ahead, we've got our basic cabin control lighting. We've got the ability to turn off our cabin lights as well, whether the door's open or closed. Now this specific one does have the panoramic roof, so really, really nice, and it does open things up very, very well inside of this thing. But a couple things to note, we've got the ability to open or close our shade. We can open and close the window, or we can just do a little bit of a bump up instead. So if we want to just create a little vent, we've got the capability to easily do that. Looking along our driver's side door, so we've got our unlock and our lock buttons, the ability to kill off power to our rear windows, adjust our side view mirrors, and then windows up and down. We will have an upgraded sound system if we're in the higher trim levels of the vehicle, but this is just the XLT trim level. But this is going to be standard across all of the lineup as well. So we've got the ability to open up our trunks. We've got our power liftgate, open and close. We've got our fog lamps, figure out what's going on with our running lamps. So turn them off, turn them on automatically, turn them on all the time, and then we've got the ability to either increase or decrease the brightness on that instrument cluster screen. Adjusting the driver's seat and the passenger seat inside of the vehicle, the Explorer lineup is going to be power, regardless of the trim level that you're looking at. Now, having said that, when it comes down to the higher trim levels, you will have the option for massage chair seats, which are incredible. So definitely useful, especially if you're the type of person that, you want to ride with a little bit more comfort. When it comes down to the steering wheel itself, in the XLT version of the vehicle, it's going to be manual telescopic, so up and down. When you're in the higher trim level, it's going to be a power adjustable instead. And then we will have seat memory buttons inside of the higher trim levels as well. Next up, taking a peek at the steering wheel. So it's going to look slightly different. Well, the styling of it's going to be slightly different depending on what trim level of the vehicle you're looking at. But we do have adaptive cruise control. We've got the ability to increase or decrease our volume, or we can mute out from there. Along the right-hand side, we've got the ability to change between active songs or radio stations. We can hang up or answer a phone call, and we can adjust what's going on in our menu in the middle there. So we've got different setups and navigations and things like that we can do. And the navigation, things like that, will actually be viewable directly through that middle screen. We've got our voice command button, and the voice command button is going to give us the ability to either change radio stations, we can make phone calls, or if your vehicle is equipped with factory navigation, you'd have the ability to be able to navigate by using that instead. Now, one thing to note is that if your vehicle does not have factory navigation, don't worry about it, because we do have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support inside of this Sync 3 system. You do have to be wired connected, but you do have the ability to use Google Maps, Apple Maps, or Waze directly through this middle screen. So really, really beneficial there. Now, taking a peek, we do have paddle shifters, which are going to come standard across the entire Explorer lineup, which is really, really nice. Now, we do have quite a few settings that are available there, so if you're looking for more of a comprehensive walkthrough on that Sync 3 system, check down in the description below, because I do a deep dive into how all of this stuff works. We've got some basics, though, of driver assistance. So we've got our cruise control, so normal, adaptive, etc. Lane keeping system is going to work the same across the Ford lineup. So if you start to veer over into a lane, we've got the option for it to give us a steering wheel shake, almost as if you're running over rumble pavement. Second option would actually recenter you and pull you back into your lane. Third option would give you a shake and it would recenter you. So we've got some great settings that are available there. Safety-wise, we do have pre-collision assist, so the vehicle can actively brake for us if it senses a potential collision. And very similar to our vehicles across the Ford lineup, we do have our blind spot system to let us know if anybody's entered the blind spot on either side of the vehicle. Moving down, we've got a little bit of storage space. We've got our volume rocker, tuning rocker, the ability to change songs or radio stations. We've got dual zone climate control in the vehicle across the entire trim level lineup. We can figure out what's going on with our fan. We've got heated seats at a minimum inside of the Explorer. We will have the option for cooled seats when we get into the Limited and above, and certain packages will give us that heated steering wheel as well. Next up, as you can see there, we do have the ability to plug in a few things. So we've got our traditional USB ports as well as a traditional cigarette lighter adapter as well. Moving down, we've got a little storage area for our phone, cup holders, our selector switch to go between park, reverse, neutral, drive, or our manual mode. Moving down a bit, we've got our parking brake, our auto hold setting, the auto start stop, which this is the one that's going to potentially kill power to the engine, while the auto hold setting, if we have the setting turned on, if we take our foot off the brake, the car won't move. We've got some active drive modes so we can move between our normal mode. We've also got our Eco, Sport, and then Tow Haul. Along the other way, as you can see there, we also do have our Slippery, Trail, and then our Deep Snow and Sand. Back to normal again. Now, one thing to note, we do have the ability to turn off traction control. We can turn that on or off as necessary. And if the vehicle was equipped with Park Assist, we would have that ability to do that from there as well. And back down, so depending on the trim level of the vehicle you're looking at, you will also have a wireless charging pad along the back there as well. As you can see there, we also do have a little storage space. So we've got a little storage tray, and we've also got a little pocket along the back there. So we've got a traditional cigarette lighter adapter in the back of this as well. Now, as we start to move up overhead, so this specific vehicle does not have HomeLink. If we're in the Limited and above, we would have the ability to do that. As you can see there, we've got our vanity mirror with the lights. We can slide that open, and we can also adjust this as necessary. Clicking that back into place, and up overhead. So in the XLT version of the vehicle, we will have that manual mirror. So in the Limited and above, it will be an auto dimming mirror. Looking up above, we've got some cabin control lights as well. Now this specific one, first of all, let's look at that. So we've got our sunglasses holder, but this one does have the twin panel sunroof as well. So really opens up the vehicle for us. Whether that you get that one, it is going to be optional inside of the Explorer lineup, but we've got the ability to open and close the shade as necessary. We can vent out the vehicle, or we can open and close that twin panel sunroof as well. Well, folks, that was a quick look at the Explorer versus the Edge. Which vehicle do you think you would go with? If you have any questions, drop down in the comments section below and let me know. If you enjoyed the content, give it a thumbs up, think about subscribing, and until I see you next time, make sure you stay safe. We're going to have a little bit of fun. Now, when it comes down to what type of fuel you should be using, Now, when it comes down to spacing inside of the Explorer, so I've got the driver's seat set up. When it comes down to the liftgate inside of the Explorer, so one of the nice things is that across the entire Explorer lineup, very proper.